Alrighty, we'll kick off. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for showing up at 4:25, 4:20, end of the day. My name's Peter Comster. I'm the head of venture partnerships at Melbourne Business School. We've had a slight shuffle in the agenda, hence I've got some notes with me. So this is going to be a bit ab lib as well as great. So let's see how we go. In the interest of time, I'll pass over to Claire and Vib to introduce themselves, and we'll also have the Chad, hopefully, joining us shortly. So over to you, Claire.
Okay, well, I don't go by just one name, so I'm Claire Field. I'm a Kiwi and an Aussie, and so lovely to have some Kiwis, the Kiwi contingent up the front. I background in government, always in education, and I've been running my own consulting practice coming up 9 years now, looking particularly at post-school education and with a big emphasis on EdTech.
Good day. My name is Vipor, and I have a portfolio career. I run 2 startups, and I also teach at QUT, Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, in Queensland. I teach entrepreneurship undergrads, and I also teach decision making at MBA school. So, over to you,
Chad.
Hello. My name is Chad Ronaldo. I'm the Managing Director for the Global Entrepreneurship Network here in Australia. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I'm also the CEO for a not-for-profit called Startup Status, which maps and measures the innovation ecosystem in Australia, and also a research fellow with the Rural Economy Centre of Excellence, where we're looking at the contributions of the innovation ecosystem to resilience, particularly in regional communities.
Fantastic. And I will just share some apologies. Mike Prittis, founder of Fathom, was to be today. He rang me from the plane this morning to say, I can't make it, Pete. I'm so sorry. Family emergency. And then the next person I bumped into at this conference was Chad. And I said to Chad, what are you doing at 4:15 today? So thank you. And then Chad said, there's somebody else that has a few points to share on this panel is Vib. So hence my notes, because I had to sort of rearrange things. But consummate professional that I am, we'll kick off. So there's a few themes I want to cover today. Melbourne Business School, for those of you that may or may not know, is actually 55% business community owned. So that model doesn't exist in Australia, so by business for business. And we've started a sort of ambitious journey to continue to be relevant in the world of business. As Australia's top business school, we've launched a new innovation hub, MBS and a future of work and learning. So through that lens, I'll share 1 or 2 points throughout the discussion today, but I really want to address the topic of future of work and learning. And in our example, what does Australia's top business school do to support this topic? And are we building a new business school or not bricks and mortar just yet? But I hope we can sort of have some of those conversations. So I've got a few questions for the group, and I'll kick off on the theme of the current landscape of entrepreneurship education. So a bit of a juicy topic. And I'll start with Claire, because we've chatted about this a bit more than the other panel. Given your extensive experience in education and EdTech, what key trends and challenges are you observing in entrepreneurship education in Australia?
I'm going to defer to my colleague on this. He can go very deep on entrepreneurship education, but I think that changing future of work, how do we gear people up for that change, and how do we gear them up for an entrepreneurial mindset, is a particular challenge that universities, our vocational education TAFEs and other private providers are grappling with at the moment. Government's trying to wrap its head around it, and then you throw into that the EdTech sector. And I just briefly will start there. Go1 is a fantastic example of an Australian EdTech firm that is really, you heard it, for those of you who are in the room, making a powerful difference. And I think apart from the fabulous people and their mindset and all the things that they are doing, one of the reasons for their success, and what is a greater challenge for other Australian edtechs, is that they chose to work and focus on that corporate learning, that upskilling and reskilling. They're a B2B model. Most of our edtechs in Australia are. Why? We're very fortunate. We have very high quality school education and post-school education. So parents and families aren't looking a lot for additional education support from our EdTech community. So it's a B2B sales model, and if you're doing that in the education sector, you're mostly trying to engage with very large, old, often government-owned and very traditional institutions. So we do have some great other EdTech firms doing good stuff, but there's much greater capacity to innovate and scale in that corporate learning space. And to bring it back to the post-school education sector, that is something that the sector itself is grappling with. So briefly, we've got a whole set of reforms coming in our higher education sector and some more in our vocational sector. The universities themselves, for the first time that I have seen, have actually written that down on a piece of paper. They've made a submission to the government through this reform process that helping skills of the future, helping to upskill and reskill people, that entrepreneurism, that focus, they need to be more entrepreneurial, they need to be helping to educate more students, and they need to do things differently. It's quite profound in their submission. So that might kick us off, and maybe someone with deep expertise on entrepreneurship education.
Yeah.
So the way we look at education and entrepreneurship, if you dissect the word in two parts, entrepreneurship is part art and part science. So it's a bit of a craft. So you science, you explore things. In art, you express the way you want to solve the problem, and in between, you find the craft to do it. So when I put my university lens hat on it, and what we do is we make sure that we have the right balance of theory and practice. And we try to work with corporate, government, and students. And we try to have a cross KPI among three entities. So having the cross KPI is government provides provocation, and that provocation could be what are the new discoveries you're going to do using entrepreneurship, but also where is the corporate? So who are we doing it for? Because if those students are provocated to solve, let's say, future of food, future of work, when they do it, where do they go? They may start a business. That's another part of entrepreneurship, but they also learn the skill of solving a problem, a good problem, and they might end up working with the government or corporates. So that's two sides of entrepreneurship education from a university lens. With the startup lens, what I've seen is it's a lot of awareness, and it's not a lot of skills, but it's also a lot about character. So we're not just, as a startup, what I will look for is having that character, not just the skills, soft skill or hard skills. I want to see a character when someone comes and joins a startup, works in that. So both ways.
Fantastic. And let's shift the focus now to, I guess, innovation in learning and work. And the reason this is important for Melbourne Business School is we've launched an incubator earlier in the year focused on education, EdTech, but we're looking at learning and development and organisational challenges and not just student programs. So the future of work, the future of learning, upskilling, reskilling is critical for the country. And we're having conversations with a lot of large organisations of how to solve for that. So with that sort of lens, I'll introduce Chad as well. And Chad, a few questions I was going to ask you on this topic, but what are you seeing from a future of work and learning? What are some of the trends that you're aware of? And how can institutions, governments, policymakers lean into the opportunities that are ahead for us, and shape the future of work and learning more effectively?
Oh, is that all?
That's all, Chad. You got this.
Okay, good. Look, it's big. So obviously we have technology is ramping up just significantly. Generative AI and the changes and the rapid advancements we have there. And one of the other big challenges is our ability as a society to respond to change. And particularly within Australia, like the research they did not too long ago is that we're ranked number 13 in fear of failure. So we talk about all these changes that are coming through, and we're also number 1 in intrapreneurship, or doing entrepreneurial activity inside of an organization, which means that it's not necessarily outside the organization. So we like to do things that are safe, and so the work that you do is absolutely essential. And also it's almost probably more difficult, because that's why we have programs in schools, because at a certain point as we grow, like looking at all of us, whether it's going to the gym or changing some sort of life habit, at some point you think, oh, man, it's just too hard. I'm going to start with that generation if I can just get them earlier. So as far as the trends we see with the future of work, look, it is obviously transforming. There's not a single job out there that's not going to be transformed the next 2 or 3 decades fundamentally by technology. Jobs are going to be completely gone. But by the same token, I think that we are going to naturally adapt. We are a complex adaptive system. We will get the feedback, and we are going to figure it out. But that said, I think we're also going to be seeing significant inequalities increase in certain areas, and we need to adapt to that as a society. And so the work that you do at the business school needs to, as Vib said, kind of address the mindsets, but also, as was mentioned, we have to look at it from a systems perspective. One of our prime ministers recently stood up one from a few turns ago and said, we just need to get over our fear of failure. We just need to change our mindset. And that frustrates me a bit, because that's putting all the pressure on you when you are a product of this entire system. So we do have a natural fear of failure, which we have to accommodate. All the roles will change. And so we need, as a society, to kind of take us on that journey to address it.
Thank you, Chad, and very well answered. And a follow-up question for Claire, thinking about education and skills going hand in hand, and Claire's obviously done a lot of work in the vet sector as well, vocational education sector. And I've asked you this question, Claire, before, but maybe your perspective has changed. But what does a future of learning and work utopia look like?
Strap in, utopia. Look, I think the what is going to be key, and I would say this is for vocational education, but also for higher education, is to be able to be adaptable enough as the world of work is changing so profoundly quickly. And you think about Gen AI, right, and ChatGPT, and all we have talked about in education for the last 9 months is how do we stop cheating? Should we go back to paper and pencil? Those are, and we're finally moving beyond those conversations, right? Those are, of course, important conversations to have. The much harder problem is how on earth are you going to keep your course content current, right? And a lot of our, going back to the Australian vocational education system, it currently has a lot of rigidity built into it. For all good reasons, 30 years ago we wanted to do things nationally rather than every state teaching electricians differently. It made sense 30 years ago. Do we need, well, maybe it still makes sense for the electricians today. It doesn't when you're teaching business and consulting and all of those white-collar knowledge kind of roles that are being disrupted, but also the creative industries. So the utopia looks like vocational education, I would say business schools, with very tight connections to industry, with a, again, systems-based approach to quality assurance that doesn't restrict their flexibility to tailor and change what they teach in a much quicker system than they do now. I don't know that how we get to you, well, I have some ideas, but there's another conversation on how we get there. But I think this is the conversation within education that we need to now be having urgently.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. I'm conscious of time, so I'm whipping through the next topic, which is going to be one close to your heart, Chad, about innovation ecosystems as well, and hubs. And just for sort of context, when Melbourne Business School started on this journey to say, hey, we're going to build a new innovation hub and finance it and support it, the goal is to build new ventures, new businesses. So we're prototyping some new businesses, which is language that doesn't often come up at a traditional business school. So that's the first perspective. The second perspective is, I'm starting as a sort of partnership leader, starting to look at other partnership models around the globe. So looking at SaaS partnership models and channel partnerships, etc. Again, it's a language that's not often used in this sector. So really those trailblazers and pioneers, they're the people we want to get into Melbourne Business School and into incubators and into new ventures that we're building out. So with that perspective of innovation hubs and your experience with this, Chad, how do you think universities, corporates and government organisations can more effectively synergise to support entrepreneurship education?
It's interesting because that's three questions right there in terms of like a hub model. So there's 5 models typically for an innovation hub, and that's university, government, corporate, venture capital, and philanthropic or independent. And all that money goes in, that money expects a return. So government expects some sort of economic development typically, or corporates expect some sort of R&D or return on investment. Universities want student attraction or access to grants. And so as soon as we start understanding that and just getting it very simple, because what problem is we talk innovation hubs almost like a church, and we want to transform entrepreneurship in the spiritual way, and it's all esoteric and ethereal, and then when funding's starts getting tight or governments change, there goes our funding for our hubs, and this is all awesome 3-year cycle, ups and downs, and financially distressed business models. So what I think we need to do, and where we are seeing, and in Australia, we saw a massive increase in innovation hubs over about a 10-year period from the ideas boom, $1.1 billion, to say, let's do innovation something. And boom, in 2018, we had 10 to 15 innovation hubs every single month. In 2019, 2020, 3 or 4 years later, we started seeing the drop-off. But what we have now is we're starting to wake up and say, oh, it's not just university's job. It's not just government's job. We need to work together. So all of that preamble to say what we are seeing is they're all coming together to say it's a shared investment in this outcome. But what we do need to do is we need to measure better. We need to build those collaborative relationships. And that comes back to some of the earlier questions on how do we change the system so that we can work better together to get the outcomes collectively, rather than this pendulum swing of saying it's government's job. No, we need to be industry-led. No, it needs to be universities, at which point everybody else abdicates their leadership. So how do we all work better together and collaborate, which I think the Melbourne Business School is doing exceptionally well, and then also working with other partners so that one institution doesn't have to be the leader, because the problem is more complex than any one person, one institution, and frankly, given this conference, one nation can solve. So how do we work better together and get a lot of that framework in place and then do the initiative, rather than one entity standing up and saying, hey, I hope everybody else comes along for the ride.
Thanks, Chad. And just 1 second, I just wanted to add, I was going to ask Mike Prittis that question with reference to the Mars Innovation Hub in Toronto, which is doing some amazing things. If you've not heard of it, check it out. And I had some follow-up questions for Mike, and again, he sends his apologies, but he is actively involved in that hub, and with an aspiration to look at that synergy between corporate, Australia, government and our education providers to build something comparable in Australia or APAC, which we're very excited about.
I just want to add to Chad's point was, in theory, we already have a very established model of triple helix, which is university, government, academia working, and corporates working together and collaborating, coordinating. But I think the time has changed. The cadence of industry development has changed. What we need to do, we are talking about future of work, but also work of the future as well. So what we need to do is, as a nation, decide what are the mission, what are the biggest problem we want to solve as a nation. And then the triple helix can work together to solve that big problem which we want to solve in 50 years' time, or 30 years' time, or 20 years' time. So what's the trajectory looks like as a triple helix? We haven't had the conversation yet at the national level.
And a good, Claire, you can also add to that, but I was also going to ask you about the role of edtechs in this conversation. Claire's also on the board of EduGrowth, so an important piece of the puzzle for us in our sort of innovation work, but also nationally, and maybe touching on those nation-building challenges or opportunities, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. So EduGrowth, if you don't know it, is an EdTech hub here in Australia, and it's gone through some changes in terms of its original founders and what it was originally set up to do, founded by Navitas, one of our global education providers, and a number of universities. It's now shifting, where it is now working with some of our state governments to help our EdTech companies go offshore. Right, because they've got that B2B and that particular focus on government and education systems. We've recently signed an agreement with Western Sydney University to be a partner in an innovation network, so that where universities or other education providers want to put their hand up to test new models, and where the EdTech companies are looking for test beds, that there is a built-in platform and infrastructure for that activity to happen, to try and facilitate that. And then it's got that membership focus. So it really is bringing together a variety of different players within the Australian EdTech system.
Thank you, Claire. And the last theme I want to touch on, and then open to some questions as well. So hopefully start thinking about your questions for either of us. Preferably not me, because I've had a stressful morning. Thanks, Mike Prittis, just calling that out. I want to talk about diversity and inclusivity in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education. And one of the talks today was that the average entrepreneur is 42 in Australia. So I'm a bit too late, unfortunately. I just wanted to get that joke in. I'm just past my prime, but that's okay. And I wanted to sort of explore this a little bit for Melbourne Business School, as I touched on, a very traditional premium brand. We've actively tried to bring in a different, disruptive, trailblazing voices into the conversation. So I'm talking to startups, startup hubs. I can see some people I know in the audience, investors. We're talking about maybe a VC fund of our own. We're talking to lots of different people. And I'll kick off maybe with you, Claire, if that's okay. How can we make entrepreneurship education more globally relevant and considering diverse cultural perspectives and experiences?
So when we talked about this as a topic and an issue, Peter, what I wanted to draw on was my background and interest in international education. Obviously, Australia is a real hub for international education and international students, and we see some opportunities that particularly universities are taking to be more inclusive in the education that they're offering, and to help their students with a more entrepreneurial and work-focused opportunity, and that's in two ways. One is to have a global mindset when it comes to work-integrated learning. Right? There's a range of great EdTech platforms and others that can be used. There can be virtual internships, internships that students do when they're in their home country, if they've gone home for the holidays, or as part of their studies. So helping connect them into, not just into Australian companies and opportunities, but helping to make that happen. And equally, we do have that the opportunity for Australian students to do the same. So I think that's part of the global mindset and approach. And actually where I've seen that done best, I'm sure Melbourne is very close behind, is Singapore. I was lucky enough to spend a little bit of time on a recent study tour at Singapore Management University, and one of their professors there, and I don't have my notes and I will totally mangle this fabulous Professor Venki's surname, but what they are doing is systematising a whole range of opportunities for their students to engage in a whole range of entrepreneurial projects with corporates, solving real life problems that businesses have, not just in Singapore, literally across the world. They're also getting their business students to do Google certificates at the start of their business degrees, right? Built into the structure of the course. They can't teach it as well as Google can. Let's get the kids, heading off there. A range of internships with global companies headquartered out of Singapore. So there's some really, if we if we look up and outwards, I think there's some great ways to expand those global opportunities for our students.
Quick one. At QUT in Brisbane, what we did with QUT Entrepreneurship, which is mandated to provide a platform for all the students and staff to explore their entrepreneurial side, whatever it may be, business or mindsets. When we launched 4 years ago, and we went to units and said, you're teaching, let's say, mechatronics. What we're going to do, we're going to come in and do one session with mechatronics students. Like, no, this is business, not mechatronics. So we went again and pitched. So first year we got 3 units, apart from business, that, hey, come and tell us what entrepreneurship is. After 3.5 years, we have 67 units. They want us to be in that unit, telling how entrepreneurship can help mechatronics or anything else. So now they're making robots which people want, not making robots which no one wants. So, and university is the only place where we can find the most diverse set of people. And we try to do that, tell the students that this is the place where you will find the most diverse people. Use this hive mind and build upon it. And you're right, Singapore, I have a very good experience with Singapore. They're doing fantastically well in terms of, and they're teaching entrepreneurship for the last 25 years. So.
And can I just maybe ask a follow-up question of you, Chad, understanding the networks and the innovation hubs globally and the work of Jen and this conference, where have you seen that sort of innovation and inclusivity, diversity and inclusivity work very well to support innovation and entrepreneurship? Are there some regions in the world or some countries where you think they're doing it really, really well? Is there lessons learned for Australia that you've observed? Just maybe some comments on that.
I would only propose where there's necessity, right? So, if we look at Australia and say what are our challenges, I think it's just more the population and the need and the effort. So, like globally, I don't necessarily have any specific. Well, and maybe that's a bit of a challenge with the actual ranking system is having that diversity aspect in there. But there are some great hubs and some great programs. But because, for example, with Mars, I'd be interested in do they have a diversity ranking on them? I know in Australia we don't necessarily have any sort of, like in a lot of the mapping work I do, I can't say which one is the most diverse or the most inclusive, even though they might have some diversity inclusive programs. So perhaps my lack of answer is highlighting an opportunity.
Peter, can I make it just a point on diversity? It's something that concerns me. I don't want to get all into government policy, but the government has brought in a policy to provide an additional year of student loan support for students to do a kind of a start-up year at the end of their degree. And, in some ways, that's a good initiative, except the ones who will find it hardest to take on another year of debt and be working on their startup and not, and not having mum and dad able to pay the bills and not perhaps, being able to live at home are poorer kids, right? People from underrepresented groups who, it's been a big enough deal to pay their way through university. And so I think when we're thinking about the diversity of our local students and offering them opportunities, we need to be not just giving them help to meet the cost of the extra year, we need to be providing additional financial support so they can truly focus themselves on their startup idea and really go for it and give it all they've got.
And I might add on to that. One of the challenges and we saw this in Australia with that big ideas boom I mentioned, right? It went out there and it was all things to all people, which meant people that probably could already have access. We had an innovation hub with my local government. We're the first fully owned and operated local government innovation hub in Australia. $1.1 million facility, nice big glass walls, retrofitted fire station 101. And it was great. We had 150 entrepreneurs come through in a regional community. We raised about $250 million collectively between them. And I remember one night walking through the hub, turning the lights off and thinking, this is great. Anybody can give it a go. As I saw somebody sleeping on the park bench outside of our hub. And I thought, that person, as inclusive as we want to be, as open as we want to be, is probably never going to walk in. And then we start doing more work out in regional communities, and the further out you go, you realize there's less and less opportunity. And then you start stacking all of those, what they call the intersectionalities, into the peripheries. And a First Nations woman in a remote community that may be older, and you start having all these character aspects. And so then how do we support that? Now, what we are seeing with the innovation ecosystem, it does start getting out to the peripheries as it matures. We have programs now for First Nation investors. We have programs for regional communities and schools. But they are fewer, and there is a regional tax, there's a periphery tax where it just costs more, and so we need to figure out how we are going to compensate for that and provide that inclusivity both across the nation. And yours was a good question. We are looking globally. So again, at a global conference, the challenge I put out to you guys is please share with us your stories of what you're seeing so that we can collectively learn, because it's something that we wrestle with, I would propose, as a nation, if not around the world.
Thank you, Chad. And we might turn it to the audience for some questions now. And, okay, straight away. I think I saw 1, 2, 3, 4 in that, or 5. So over here in the front row, maybe we'll get the mic down to you. Sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that.
This man was first, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Can I just be controversial? You know,
Please.
given we heard from Go1 before, given the student debt we've just heard of, given the accessibility issues, Chad, you've just mentioned, I go around a lot of universities around the world. I'm not sure building business schools for tomorrow is the right title. I think it's shrinking. Because the market, business schools, the way they operate and their lack of use of ed tech, they are the petrol and diesel cars of today. And I just can't see how they're going to sustain, especially as the educators, lecturers, academics within are resistant towards using technology to help them teach. I'd be interested to know what people think.
I can touch on that a little bit, and we've got a new dean starting at the end of the year, so she hasn't started yet, so I'm going to choose my words here a little bit. But I guess what I'm trying to sort of suggest is our vision of a business school for the future will look very different. We are building ventures at MBS. We are bringing in subject matter experts, global perspectives, different voices that haven't sort of been part of the education system. So where does the knowledge sit? It sits in various domains. It's not just traditional academics. From a technology perspective, we have brought our academics and our subject matter experts on board to use some of the emerging technology. We're having conversation with edtechs to say, hey, we've got these huge 3 to 5 year learning problems in this country that organizations are trying to solve, and trying to co-solution with edtech providers. So for us, it's more about building a different model of learning that encompasses talent from across the country. So that's kind of the perspective from Melbourne Business School. Whether that's the same from other business schools, I'm not sure, but we're trying to sort of really look at the pioneers and the trailblazers. And the reason that's important is, will a business school still be relevant in 5, 10, 20 years' time, to your point, which I think you're trying to make?
I think 2 or 3.
In terms of using of technology per se, I know at QET we have at least, if I can count it, remember well, close to 230 tech we're using, tech platforms, so Studio City and whatnot, help writing, help sharing, collaboration, media, and from native digital to AI technologies. So there is a convergence of technology, but also academia, and I can't predict what's going to happen 3 to 4. No one can predict. We're just trying to be adaptable to whatever is coming. We don't know.
Maybe a quick response, Chad, and then we'll move to the second and third.
Yeah, so just quickly, it is a valid question, and we ask it about many of the species in the ecosystem. Innovation hubs don't work, accelerators don't work, government doesn't work. But what we do see is we see them evolve. And so maybe the title could just as well be the future of business schools as much as business schools of tomorrow, because I think they will still exist. It's just they will adapt and evolve rapidly in the ecosystem.
Who was next?
Where am I going?
Just
I'm Roto from the beautiful Ethiopia, where the human being origin is. This is one of the best sessions attracted me to attend this 5th GEC, Building Business Schools for Tomorrow. Ethiopia is a growing country which requires best model business schools. In our practice, we focus more on concepts. We are not practicing in any business school. There is Addis Ababa business faculty. No business has been done. There is commercial college of Ethiopia where business are not practiced. We are all prepared for official works. Would you please tell us the real practice of your business schools and the role of all your major stakeholders?
A big question. I won't do it justice, but I will really just re-emphasize our business school is 55% business community owned. What that means in practice is when we're developing new MBA programs, it is concepts and perspectives led from the business community. Ken McKenzie is joining our board from BHB very shortly. That translates to the short courses, that translates to building new ventures as well. So I might catch up with you after this session and unpack that a bit further, but we're actively looking at building new ventures in the school, which is tapping into the school's expertise as well. So that's how we're attacking it. But I'm happy to sort of chat with you further after this session as well. Let's just move to the next question, just over here, please. Thank you for the question, though.
Hi, I'm Suku from RMIT. I've been.
Hello.
Hey, Vita. I've taught in business schools. I've got a startup. I've been an entrepreneur, pitched, done things, crash, burn, and now I'm in an entrepreneurial school with RMIT. My question is this: there was a narrative earlier in the day today. Smart kids become entrepreneurs. Other kids go to university. It's a very interesting line, and how universities have got a huge attrition rate. Knowledge and information has become a commodity. You know, you can go online to Coursera, take the same course for $72, and get a cert. It's validated. You got Google Garage skills. So many things are going on. What do you think that needs to be changed from the entrepreneurial angle, especially business schools creating MBA students, MBA grads? Because universities, have got a very traditional model, and so the changes that it's quite interesting to see what MBS has done. How much lead time do we have? Do we actually have that time to tackle these big challenges that have ahead of us? And the talent that needs to come through.
I'll answer it very quickly and pass on to my panel colleagues, but I think the lead time is minus 5-6 years. For MBS, the pandemic helped us along, kicked us up the butt a bit to say, hey, we need to launch the best online MBA program in the country, which we have done successfully. But I think it's both. It's both the theory and the education plus practical experiences. I'd love to see a future where young learners do both a vet qualification and a university qualification, personally.
I'm going to jump in here before we come to you, because I've been thinking about this for quite some time. And I did actually start a PhD on part of this topic. Couldn't get enough responses from the sector because at that stage the sector really hadn't turned their head to it. And I think, while I agree with our first questioner from the UK, there is an urgent need for change. I don't think that within 2 to 3 years, a fine MBA from the Melbourne Business School has no currency. But I do think your point is where the sector is finally starting to turn its attention to. That in IT, business, marketing, a whole range of those industry-accredited alternatives delivered by global edtech and tech platforms are starting to eat the traditional parts of vocational education in particular here and higher education. We're never going to have a doctor trained in a 6-month Google short course, thank goodness, right? So there is going to be a need for long forms of learning for traditional institutions, but there is an awful lot that it might be that the medical boards, right, or the law society decide that with the great help of a Coursera or a Go One, that they could run the law courses themselves. So I do think there is a real need for some urgency, and I think we are starting to see it in different institutions.
Very quickly, with 3 lenses,
Sense of urgency, it's too late in terms of the change. Sense of curiosity, we need to listen to our customers, our students, what we want to be as a university. Should we have a shop instead of classrooms, businesses instead of classrooms within the university? Sense of ambition, can we be the innovation epicenter for each city? So research and commercialization, can it be a reality for each and every uni to commercialize basic science? So that sense of ambition. So the three things we need to think really hard.
Let's just go to two. We've got time. I've got this clock that's ticking. It's like a bomb in front of the room, which is scary. 2 minutes to go. Two more questions if we can. Just straight ahead here.
Oh, sorry. I've got.
Who's got the mic? Who's got the mic? Sorry.
I've asked
who else
that.
got the mic?
Sorry. Right.
The man with the mic. And then pass the mic to your left.
Yeah, no problem.
The man with the mic.
Thanks, guys. That was great. So I'm curious, Chad, you mentioned about ecosystems and, you know, one of the areas of that is universities. And, you know, that's the common kind of framework you hear around ecosystems. But I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect towards some of these non-traditional education opportunities that have been raised. And when you think about, particularly with universities, what they offer, so traditionally in my mind, you know, you get the brand, which seems to be trending to be less important and kind of condensing around some really, you know, what is seen as tier 1 universities, but we know tech companies, they're looking less to CVs, they're looking less to where you studied. Then you've got education, and there's a rise of so many new entrants, short courses. You know, you've got Khan Academy, who I learnt physics through back when I was at uni, but, you know, they're doing some amazing stuff with Gen AI and others. And then the final is, you know, alumni, and that's a really big part of universities. But again, we've got this rise of online communities and other kind of entrepreneurship communities. So I'm really curious, in a world where we know within entrepreneurship, often it's, you know, who's fastest wins. What do you see as the unique kind of opportunity, the unfair advantage for universities in the next kind of 10 years into the future?
So when you think about ecosystems, you break it down into functions and roles, right? And so you have a role, which is a combination of functions. For example, there's no such thing as an innovation hub. It doesn't exist. It's this construct that we all look at it and we say, here's all the functions, and so we collectively, socially define that as an innovation hub. What we see over time is certain functions in that hub get ripped out, especially the high value ones, and start going into other organizations, other private entities, left with the low functions in this innovation hub, which then struggles to get money. Universities, very similar. So it may provide a bunch of functions. The high value stuff gets ripped out, starts going into the open market, you know, group over here, collective over here, private sector here, and the university is left with just the traditional, maybe, you know, teaching students of a certain type or whatever. So what I propose, the university as an institution could then just adapt to say, what are the functions we do? What are the high value? What role do we wish to play? And that's a constant conversation you're hearing with universities, is saying, what is our role maybe in placemaking? What's our role in research? What's our role in teaching students? What's our role in maybe contributing to policy advocacy in a region? Maybe we set up centers, and those centers become almost pseudo-consultancies, then engaging in a market from a research base. So I would say it's dynamic and flexible, but it's going up against the institutionalized history that kept it alive till now, so they explore what could be in the future.
Thank you, Chad. Last question, gentleman with the black jacket, green pants. Sorry to point. Straight ahead. Oh, jeans, sorry, I'm a bit colorblind. Did you have a question, sir? Did you have a question?
It's blue. Yeah, that's blue.
I'm color and material blind.
Hi.
And a few other things.
The person that's clothed over there?
Yeah, don't worry about that. We're all challenged in some way or another.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Go ahead.
Anyways, I'm Nathaniel Massa from the University of Malta. Actually, just a reflection here. I mean, obviously, universities are rightly so being challenged. But in truth, when you look at the topic over here, you know, the future of work and learning, building business schools, the two are actually inextricably linked. So I agree perfectly with what you were saying, that, okay, we need to see what the clients to the system want. And again, in saying this, you know, I mean, there's a market for everything. There's non-traditional forms of education. And again, within the more structured traditional form of university education, There are different levels. There's bottom feeders, there's the elite universities, and all of these things. But ultimately, I think that what we need to really keep in mind over here is that the most important thing is context. And context is underpinned by relevance of that education. So to a certain extent, it's the applicability of what we're teaching in a practicable way that really makes a difference. Because in business schools, now, in whatever way they might morph into the future, ultimately, how shall I say this? I mean, ultimately, many of the clients to the system in business schools are actually practicing professionals. So very often, they want to get skills and tools that they can apply from the get-go. So whether it's a new MBA program, you know, they want to be able to apply that at their place of work to either further their career, or if it's a major in entrepreneurship, then it's a matter of being able to engage with that and create value, quite possibly even throughout, and this is where I commend what's going on at the Melbourne Business School, even throughout the semester itself or throughout the course program, where you're actually engaging in creating your own business or creating value. It need not necessarily be creating your own business. It could be creating value within a corporate setup. So that was just a brief reflection.
Thank you. And I might just wrap us up, and I will just leave you with this. About 15 years ago, Professor Simon Bell, who's a wonderful academic at University of Melbourne, came to my employer at the time, which was the University of Tasmania, and started to talk to us about the concept of students as customers. And this was 15 years ago, and most academics at the school were like, no way, never use the word customer, they're students, they're learners. I guess what he was trying to say is, how do you maintain and sustain value across that chain, across that value chain through students, alumni, etc. And from our perspective with the business school, it's also about leaning into the future of work and learning, because if business schools educators are not trying to solve that problem for the country, then all we're talking about is just, you know, doing studies and a diploma and a certificate, which is not going to be relevant in the future. Correct. Evolution, baby, as they say. So with that, I just sincerely want to thank my panelists. Some of them stepped in earlier this morning. Some of them stepped in 20 minutes before this session. And thanks, everybody, for your attention in this afternoon. Thank you very much.